Hello my guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome back to another video. So in this video, I'm going to be doing the inverted color challenge, which is pretty much you draw a drawing and at the end you're going to invert it. So you're going to try to color your drawing with the inverted versions of the colors you want. If it doesn't make sense now, it will pretty quickly, so don't worry too much. Before the video starts though, please make sure you're subscribed. I'm trying to reach 3,000 subscribers by my 1-year anniversary, which is January, so please subscribe if you haven't already so I can hit that goal. And on with the video. So first I wanted to start with a kind of practice thing. So I quickly drew my persona so I could do some color tests and try and make this as accurate as possible to develop some kind of understanding of how this works. So what I didn't know at the beginning of this was for the actual hue, it's going to be the opposite side of the color wheel. That part was pretty self-explanatory. Where I was much more confused was in terms of brightness and saturation. So I knew that the brightness was going to get inverted, but I didn't know at first if the saturation was. So that was my first kind of confusion. So like I knew I had to do an outline in white instead of black, but I didn't know like if I was supposed to do the opposite of the saturation I wanted or if I was supposed to keep that at normal saturation. I also didn't know what parts of the square that Ibis Paint has to edit your colors. I didn't know exactly what parts would change the brightness and what would change the saturation. So I kept going back and forth on like what exactly was the opposite of my brightness or saturation I was trying to go for. But for all the colors, what I would do is I would start out on the color that I wanted. Then I would go to the opposite hue. Then I would try to go to the opposite brightness. I'm really glad I did this way, honestly, because it was so much easier to be able to directly envision the opposite color like that. Otherwise, that would have been a nightmare. It's so much easier to do this with a color selector digitally. I could not imagine having to do this traditionally. Maybe if I get a tripod, I'll try that sometime, but oh boy, it would be so bad. So when I had finished my first attempt, I ran it through a website that would invert it and then saw how I did. Now, what I noticed for the first one was it was very desaturated. So originally I had been doing the opposite saturation, but after looking at this, I was like, okay, saturation stays the same, clearly. Everything's very gray. The hair is also too light. And then the difference between the two different green colors isn't that big. So I tried this again by editing the colors slightly. I just lightened the green by making the pink darker. Okay, this is kind of confusing, but I made the pink on the shirt darker so that it would be lighter and differentiate from the other green color more. Then I darkened the skin and the hair a bit. Then I ran it through again and it was better, definitely. The skin was still the main problem though. Since the skin is so light and usually when I go for that color, it is full saturation but very little brightness. I didn't know exactly what the opposite of that would be because I kept trying to like go to the direct opposite of the square or, you know, just go to one axis opposite of the square, if that makes sense. But none of that was working out. It was just becoming like white instead. So I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I just kept trying to mess with it to figure out the pattern. So I just tried one more time, fixed the hair up a bit more because I still wasn't quite happy. And the skin still wasn't great, but I'm like, this is good enough. I'm not getting this. I'm just gonna have to move on. So then I moved on to a kind of final drawing. I wasn't very confident because, you know, I still never got the skin color right with the last one, but it was time to tackle this. So what I did first was kind of make this chart / cheat sheet type thing. So I directly drew the color selector that is on Ibis Paint and tried to kind of label what each of the sides of the square changed. So you can see here, this is how I originally thought it worked. Saturation was right and up kind of thing, and then brightness was left and down. That's what I thought. Then I kind of tested it out and tried it flipping the saturation and also not flipping the saturation. It was okay at first, but then it kind of clicked in my brain, like, there are two different things that we change here, and what if it's not the sides of the square that are like kind of sliders to change it? What if it's the diagonals? So I tried that out. I did some tests at the bottom of the cheat sheet to kind of show examples of what the inversions would be, and did some test colors, and it worked great. Using the diagonals, I actually got the colors I wanted. Also, I realized I shouldn't flip the saturation, so I was just going to pull it down the middle diagonal, and that was about it. So then it came to the actual drawing. I wanted to have something that would show off a lot of color or feature some sort of rainbow. So my idea was to have just this girl wearing a rainbow cape and kind of looking at it behind her flowing. So I did some sketching, it's turning out great, want to go outline. And then I don't know what it is with me, especially recently, but outlines are kind of scary. They're kind of difficult for me. So instead I was just like, we'll just color this first. So I kept making like new color layers and drawing, and then having to like turn down the transparency so I could see my sketch. It was a whole ordeal, but this isn't about me having a weird drawing process. It's about me trying to invert colors properly, which, by the way, I would definitely recommend trying this out if you're like someone who struggles with things like color theory or just kind of understanding different colors, because this really helps put into perspective the different components of colors and how they work together. And it was just really useful and fun to think about colors in this way. Even though I did this digitally, I feel like a lot of these skills are mainly going to translate traditionally, because I have trouble doing things like mixing paint colors, but this helps me understand colors a lot better. So it is definitely a very educational challenge, and I'd recommend you try it out if you struggle with stuff like this. For the color palette, I want it to be mainly neutral colors besides like that rainbow there, which is weird considering this challenge is all about color, but I want that rainbow to be the real focal point. So all the pressure was really on the rainbow, but at the same time, I was pretty confident I can make the rainbow work, since it was mainly reliant on me just going to the opposite side of the color wheel, which isn't that difficult. All the rainbow colors were fully saturated and at full brightness, so they were really easy to get done. This challenge was all about colors, but now I think about all the real colors I did were easy ones. The only ones I actually had to think too much about were the hair, the skin color. Both of them just were browns, and obviously this whole process was much easier with that cheat sheet. It was great to be able to like have a visual representation that I can actually compare it to. That was probably the smartest thing I did in this whole challenge, was make that gosh darn cheat sheet. Then I went ahead and outlined everything in white. It was a lot less scary to do after I'd already colored everything, but there definitely are some little areas that have like gaps where they're not fully against the color or where the color is peeking out, which is why I usually color after doing the outline, but I don't know, I guess you gotta mix things up every once in a while. Also, I decided I wasn't going to do any sort of background. I was thinking maybe just simple color background, but then I was like, do I really want to? Like, then I have to think about what color will go well with this, and there's already a rainbow of colors, and it's going to be really hard to make sure I don't choose a color that's close to any color in the drawing. I don't know, it was just gonna be a whole thing, and I didn't want that, so I just left it white. I I guess I made it black, but when it gets inverted, it's gonna be white. God, talking about this process is so hard. And then after I'd finished everything, I think I even like signed it, or it's like, okay, I'm done. I finished. And then I remembered that I haven't shaded anything, and that's probably something that's pretty interesting about inverting your colors, so I had to go do that. So I took an airbrush and made it white because I could have just taken all the colors and lightened them in this case, because usually what I'll do is take the color and darken a bit, because I don't typically like shading in black unless there's a lot of colors. But, you know, that's a lot of thought, lightening each color, and, you know, I had just accepted that I was done and then remembered I had shade. So I did just shade with a white airbrush instead of doing different colors. I had thought at first that was going to be really weird to like shade in white and my brain wouldn't be able to get it, but it was actually a lot easier than I thought. Maybe it's because I had been drawing in inverted colors for a while, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it just didn't seem that weird. Maybe I don't have that strong a connection to black and shading or something. You know what I mean. Maybe my brain doesn't process shading as dark all the time. But it didn't feel that weird to shade with white, which I was kind of surprised about. Then after I was done, I inverted the finished drawing to see my finished project, and I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was going to be a lot weirder, but I think that cheat sheet and like figuring out how the color selector actually worked helped a lot. Everything's pretty accurate. I mean, the rainbow's close enough to my liking. If I was doing this in not inverted colors, I probably would have tweaked it a bit. And it is really bright. I don't know if I should have done them at like full saturation, but oh well. I do think their hair also could have been a bit darker, maybe a bit more saturated. It's just a bit light, but that's like me nitpicking. Oh, and I probably could have done a background as well. It wasn't that hard. Come on, I could have just put a color down, maybe done a bit of gradation in the background. It wouldn't have been that difficult. Also, this has nothing to do with like colors or anything, but can I just say, I kind of like those shoes. I struggle with drawing shoes a lot. Like, shoes are probably at the top of my struggle list right now. And these are a bit chunky, yes, but honestly, these are one of the best pairs of shoes I've ever drawn. Anyway, if you liked the video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure you follow all my socials. They are in the description below, and I post on all of them at least once a week, and I will see you all next week.